Welcome to Amazing Indiana Music Stories.
Yeah, I was born in Gary, Indiana in 1947. And the thing actually that got me going was that my godmother gave us a piano. And she said we could keep the piano as long as I used it. So I never gave it back, actually.
You still have it?
Yeah. No, well, that piano is gone, but I didn't have to give it back because I kept playing. My mom decided that I would take piano lessons, and she found a very good piano teacher. Dr. Granule L. Whittemore was my piano teacher from the age of 7. And I took lessons from him until I actually got out of college. I was taking lessons from him. But at any rate, that's how I happened to get started with the piano.
Did anybody else in your family play music or were influential in that way?
Yeah, my mother came from a rather large family of 10 brothers and sisters, and they all played the piano.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah, my father was from kind of an athletic background, so he played basketball and football and baseball, and he once broke his collarbone, and his mom brought him a violin, and he played that until he got well, and no more music from him.
How about that? So when you started playing piano, what kind of music interested you, and where did that
So that was mostly classical music that Dr. Whittemore taught. And I didn't really start playing jazz almost until I got out of college. Mm-hmm. My parents they were big jazz fans. And so even as a kid, they would take me to Chicago to the Regal and Tivoli theaters to see people like Count Basie and Duke Ellington. And then they had those records, or they bought me a record player early on, and they bought me some Kitty records, but I'd play their record collection.
What was the first record you bought? Do you remember?
Oh, geez, I don't remember the first record. It might have been a Jack McDuff album.
Okay.
There was a store in town called Goldblatt's, and they had a record section, and I can recall. And then I see you have an exhibit with Comay's, and there was another place in town called Comay's Jewelers, and they had a record department. And I can remember buying Kinda Blue from Comay's. Another thing that happened, though, too, was so we had a house that we owned that had a basement that you could rent it out, and they rented out the basement to a guy named Wiley Carter, and he had a huge jazz record collection. And I would listen to the records on the radio. Daddy O'Daly and Jesse Owens had jazz radio shows, and I would tape those shows. And one day my father said that he heard Mr. Carter playing one of the records that I had taped. So I knocked on his door, and he had this huge record collection. He was like a jazz DJ at one of the clubs. And he would lend me his records. And that, of course, helped me get into the music.
And when did you start playing live? Or recording or any of that?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I had a little band when I was a senior, and we wound up winning the citywide talent show at that time. I think the Jackson 5 participated at that citywide talent show went on for a few years, and I think they wound up participating in that show also. But we won, and that was some of my first live performances, though, were recitals from taking piano lessons. We'd have a recital each year, so I guess that was my first live performances.
And when did you first record something?
I think the first recording I did was around 79 or so. I did it on my own. We recorded with the Valparaiso University Faculty Jazz Trio. We recorded some things.
So you played live a long time
Before I ever
before you recorded
anything.
Wow, very cool. And tell us about Billy Foster Audio, how that got started and how you ended up putting out those records.
Well, basically, when I got out of college, I started hanging around nightclubs and ran into some people who could, because before that point, I really didn't know how to play jazz or what was involved or what anybody was doing. I just really loved the music, but I never found anybody really that could teach me. So I started hanging around the nightclubs and ran into people who played and learned things from them. And so up until around 78 or 79, I was playing jazz until I ran into, my cousin had an affiliation with Impressions. And so they needed a piano player. And so that's when I started playing pop music. It was with them. And so during our off times, I formed a band, Billy Foster Audio, and I found that I could write pop tunes too, so I wrote a bunch of tunes, and we made a recording eventually after doing we did a couple of years of nightclub performances as a cover band. And so I started writing tunes for that band, and around 83, we decided to record that album. And that's how that album got recorded. That band lasted for about 10 years. And during those 10 years, we were playing pop music, but also jazz during that time also.
When you were with the Impressions, were you involved in any of their recording sessions? Did you play live with them?
Well, I played live with them, but didn't do any recording with them.
But you got to know Curtis Mayfield?
Well, so Curtis Mayfield wasn't in the group at that time.
Point.
Yeah, it was Reggie Torian
Okay.
that was singing the leads in that group. Sam Gooden and Fred Cash were still in the group. It was fun. I don't think I'll say on air why I quit, but
Okay.
but it was fun. I had fun with it. I learned a lot.
Well, you played a lot of music and you're still playing, but you also were involved in education, music education. Tell us about music education.
Yeah, so I went to college for music ed, and so when I graduated in 1969, I was able to get a teaching position in Gary, Indiana, elementary music. And so I taught that all the way up until 2004 with a couple of sabbaticals. One year I went to New York and took lessons from Jackie Byard, and went to NYU and took some courses there. And then I took a year off to play with Impressions. That was in 79, I think. But yeah, I taught elementary music. We were the only school in Gary that had a band program, so I was able to teach. The odd thing was most elementary music teachers just play the piano, so I played the piano, but I also took band courses, so I knew how to play all the band instruments. And so what happened was there was a band program, an after-school band program, that somebody else was doing. And the funding ran out for that program. But we had all those band instruments at the school. So I was able to take over the band program and actually put it into the school curriculum.
Can you think of anybody that you had in class that turned out to be well-known or should have been well-known?
I had some people that in the class, I even see some students today that I had in band classes. None of them actually went on to do anything great, but a lot of them continued on in their own churches and groups and things that they did later.
Tell me about the Gary club scene when you were young. You were telling me that there were 30 clubs.
Yeah, in Gary there were 30 clubs that you could play that featured jazz. I did give you a list of them, and we would go from club to club playing. I can remember playing, Renee, my wife, was telling you about this place called Mona's, and we'd be playing in this club called The Pub, which was down the street from Mona's. And on our breaks, we would run down to Mona's to see what was happening down there. We did a lot of that, but there were clubs all over town that we played. It was a really vibrant club scene. There was an avenue called 11th Avenue that had a bunch of clubs, much like here in Indianapolis. I think it was Massachusetts.
Indiana Avenue.
Indiana Avenue, okay, that had a lot of clubs. Well, 11th Avenue was like that for us in Gary. And there were a lot of clubs on Broadway also.
Gary's come back a long way. Are there clubs now where you can play?
Not really,
Not
no.
really.
There's one club that we play there. I'm doing a lot of playing in Chicago these days, and over in South Bend, and wherever else I can play.
We'll hope to get you in Indianapolis soon.
Yeah, that would be nice to come down here and play.
So what's your fondest memory of being a part of the music business?
Well, I don't have a fondest memory because I have a lot of fond memories. You know, playing, and I just enjoy playing, and I enjoy wherever I am and whenever we're playing.
Did you ever make a full-time living in music?
Well, as a music teacher, I've made a full-time living in music. I taught 34 years at Valparaiso University jazz piano, and currently I'm teaching at Indiana University Northwest piano. And I guess, you know, all my living actually was in music, but not as a performer.
Right. So what do you think about the music business as it exists today?
Well, it's always been a strange business, I think. You know, I think not always the most talented musicians make it to the top, and I think there are some people that know how to play 3 chords real well and are making a fortune. But you do have to have talent to be in the business of some sort. So, you know, I don't know. I don't think all the best musicians always get the record contracts.
If record contracts are even worth anything today.
Well, you know, with the evolution of the internet, you're able to do or with TikTok and things like that, you're able to do a lot of things on your own that you weren't able to before. You needed a record contract to do those things. I do like the internet for that, because you can get things out and do things on your own and sell records on your own without a big record contract.
And you were kind of a pioneer in that you were selling your LPs and CDs on your own website years and years ago.
Right.
How difficult was it to sell those records when you made them? Did you have a way of getting them distributed beyond?
So at the time I made those records, there was no internet. When the internet came into being, though, then I was able to really sell those records.
They're quite popular, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're very well regarded by jazz collectors.
Yeah, fortunately for me.
Yeah, well, you earned it.
Thank you. Yeah, recording is an interesting experience, because sometimes you wind up recording maybe one tune a lot of times because things go wrong during the tune. Sometimes they go, you know, one take. And then sometimes somebody decides they want to have an idea, and then there's what we call discussion about that particular idea as to whether we want to do it or not, you know. So recording sessions are really interesting and fun. They're fun. And the thing about that I find about recording is you know, after a while, that has to be it. You can't, you know, correct everything that you want to correct. And I find that after months later, and you've forgotten what it was you wanted to correct, then usually it's fine.
Only you know.
Yeah, only you know. And after you've forgotten, and then you're listening to it like everybody else, and you don't realize that, well, maybe we should have done that, you know.
So what advice would you give to an aspiring musician that's coming through today?
My advice was do, money or not, do as much performing as you can to hone your craft, and also a lot of practicing to hone your craft so you can be the best that you can be. So when an opportunity arises, you're able to take it and take advantage of it.
Tell me some stories about people you ran into in the music business that stick with you.
So when I was teaching at Valparaiso University, we had a jazz festival that we did every year, and we had a faculty jazz trio. And with that trio, we would, for the jazz festival, one of the days of the jazz festival, we would invite in a world-renowned artist to play with. So we had a chance to play with people like Clark Terry and Red Rodney and Jimmy Heath and Terrell Stafford and just a number of people that we had the opportunity to play with. Curtis Fuller, just Art Farmer, just a huge number of people that we had the opportunity to play with. And those, playing with those people was always a learning experience for us.
Did you ever have anything go terribly wrong or unexpected in one of those situations?
Not really. Nothing that went terribly wrong. Most of the concerts went, well, all the concerts actually went fine. And it was all a great experience. One of the good experiences I had in my life was I moved to New York to stay there for a while, and I went to NYU while I was there. But I was also able to take lessons from world-famous pianist Jackie Byard, which was quite an experience to be able to hang out with him and learn from him. Also, I have a good friend named Michael Wolf, who was the music director for the Arsenio Hall show when it was on. And Mike came to Gary playing with Cannonball Adderley, and they were there for a week, and I just went up and introduced myself to him. And he would come by my house during that week, and he was the one that recommended I take lessons from Jackie Byard. But I've known Mike all those years since the 70s, the mid-70s, and he's been a good friend. I've learned a lot from Mike. Early on, one of the things I did was introduce other people to jazz. And Todd Kuhlman and Henry Johnson are two people that have done really well. Todd played with Horace Silver and James Moody and wound up being the head of the music department at Purchase College in New York. And Henry Johnson went on to play. He's played with just about everybody. It seems like he played with Jack McDuff and Donny Hathaway, and he had a long experience playing with Ramsey Lewis. He went with Ramsey Lewis and then spent 13 years playing with Joe Williams. And when Joe died, he resumed his career with Ramsey Lewis. And I was just playing with Henry at Winters Jazz Club in Chicago just the other night. So that's one of the things that I like to do, is introduce people to the music. The Gary Jazz Association is another association that we play for at least once a year, that exists in the greater Gary. Let me see, how do they phrase that? The Greater Gary, yeah, the Greater Gary American Jazz Association. and they present jazz once a month in Gary at the Gary Public Library. So those are some of the things that I'm involved with now. And of course, I'm involved with, I'm a cancer survivor, and so we've done performances for them. One of the performances that we do is a jazz cancer performance, which I tell my story in terms of my cancer journey, and we play jazz music all during those performances. And so that's something that I'm interested in doing and that we do.
Tell me about your current jazz combo that you're playing with. Is it the same people that you usually play with when you play live, or do you just put different people together at different times?
Most of the time it's the same people. Bruce Evans on bass and Lanny Turner on drums, and Renee, my wife, Renee Miles Foster on vocals. We play together quite a bit. And then I'm also in Henry Johnson's group, so I'm playing with him quite a bit also. So those are kind of my current activities, and teaching piano in my home studio, and also, as I mentioned, at Indiana University Northwest. I did have the radio show for 16 years, which you mentioned. Yes. You had a chance to listen to some. The Billy Foster Jazz Zone, which was really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing that.
You did an excellent job with that.
Well, thank you.
Tell me about playing with your wife.
Oh, we have fun playing together. It's you know, it's good to have a wife that knows something about the music that you play, and that, you know, being a musician, you're out at all hours of the night, and it's good to have somebody that understands that. You know, a lot of guys have to get divorces because their wives don't understand, why do you have to be out so late all the time, you know, and things like that. But she understands the music business, and so it's fun to have somebody that understands, you know, the things that you do.
And can sing.
And can sing, yeah. And can cook.
What a combo.
She's a great cook. I first got cancer in 1996, and I had a kidney removed that had a cancerous tumor in it. So I went from 1996 to 2007 when I found out that I had these metastases to these other places. And I was fortunate enough to be able to get in a clinical trial that kept the tumor stable in my lungs and liver for a number of years. And the clinical trial ended. But during those years, and this is why research is so important, when this first started, there were very few medicines for kidney cancer. But they were able to do some research, so at the end of this clinical trial, they had researched 2 or 3 others, and I was put on that. And I stayed on that medicine for the next 11 years, which was about a year ago, and it kept that cancer stable. And so now, the research, they're doing a lot of immunotherapy, which is therapy that boosts your immune system to take care of the things that it's supposed to anyway. And so I'm on that now, and I'm back in another clinical trial. Yeah, I would say be proactive in your care, and if you can catch things early on, my saying is, it's better to deal with it early than have to chase it down. Things can get really bad if you don't get it early. So the music is a healer for me as far as the cancer goes. And the one thing that it does is I'm not spending all my time thinking about cancer. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about music instead. And it has that experience. But it also, we talk about music as a healer, but music has a lot to do with your mood, you know. And when I'm listening to music, my mood is, well, I'm listening to it all the time, so my mood is pretty good most of the time. But it helps in that regard also. It also clinically, it's supposed to help keep your blood pressure down. It can do that. Several things that music can do to help you through a cancer diagnosis, I think. Yeah, this is one of my favorite experiences. When I had the audio band, there was this song we'd play that you might remember called The Electric Slide. It was a dance. And it always amused me that sometimes we'd have senior people come in to dance, and mostly they would just sit around, you know, with their canes and stuff. I guess they enjoy the music. But when we play The Electric Slide, they'd pop up and get in the line, and you'd see these old people dancing, and, you know, it was kind of a miracle tune, I called it. You know, you wouldn't think that they could dance the way some of them look, but they hopped up and got in the line, and, you know. So that's an example of music as a healer. I don't know how spiritual people are that are listening to this, but I think I find, so one of the things that I did as a means of thanks is I wrote a jazz vespers, music for a jazz vespers. What the jazz vespers is a religious service, but it uses jazz music instead of, you know, so I wrote a bunch of spiritual jazz music. And one of the things that I find is that when I'm writing, and playing too, I guess, is I personally feel more like a conduit rather than the person that's actually creating it. As one person put it, he says as a composer, he feels like a conduit too. He feels that he at least is the first person to hear it, you know. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel like, you know, as things are coming through me, instead of me actually being the big time creator, you know. I remember Quincy Jones saying that, you know, that God is handing out the music. And he said, it was somebody first asked him why he stayed up so late all the time. And he said he felt that if he wasn't awake when God was passing out the music, that he'd skip over him and go down to Henry Mancini's house. Thought that was funny. But he was serious.
And he was maybe right.
Yeah, I probably was right. You know, my thing about music is I feel like we all have these talents, but we're something like radios in that each one of us is tuned into, all this stuff is kind of out here, I feel like. And it depends on what you're tuned into, you know, what your station is. And I happen to be tuned into the music. Some people are tuned into the math, and they can pick that up, you know. That's kind of my theory. I'm definitely not tuned into the math station, I can tell you that.